another hand touches the Holocron. Long has it been since I have been touched by one who could feel the Force. You are hearing the voice of Darth Matu, Dark Lord of the Sith, an historian of a sort. I am a program designed to simulate Darth Matu's personality and to help pass on his teachings. Know this before we proceed. Knowledge corrupts. If you go further, you will be willingly taking your first steps on the path of the dark side. You have been warned. I know not how you found the Holocron, but now that I am awake, I am at your service. Contained within is a full history of the Sith and Jedi, to the best I could gather over my lifetime. Within is my knowledge of the Force, how to construct a lightsaber, everything you need to further you along the path of power. Do you feel it? That tickle at the back of your mind, the draw to listen, the curiosity to explore? Good. Give in to your feelings and allow me to be your guide. You have chosen History of the Force. Processing. To know the Force, one must know the history of the Jedi and the Sith. Like it or not, it is through these two groups that the will of the Force is most often expressed, or where resistance to it is found. To know the history of the Jedi and Sith is in some ways to know the history of the Force. It is important to note that the Force has always existed. As long as there is life, there too is the Force, with very rare exception. Doubtless, countless eons of knowledge have been lost to the mists of time. I have worked my entire life to know the Force, and it is through long labor and sacrifice that I have garnered what little knowledge we do have about the origins of the Jedi and the Sith. Doubtless there is more, but past a certain time the tales become nebulous, imprecise. As far back as I could go, hundreds of thousands of years, a great war was raged among the stars. The Rakatan Infinite Empire, made of a species of Force sensitives who used dark side fueled technology, was busy conquering and enslaving the galaxy. Another Force sensitive species, the Qua, constructed enormous starships which would become known as the Tho-Yor. These vessels were to be used to help defend against the Rakata, storing and discharging Force energy when needed. It was not enough. Eventually, defeat was inevitable for the Qua. These ancient beings dispersed the Tho-Yor across the galaxy to hide, lay dormant, and one day put out a call to Force sensitives, who would then be taken to the Qua world of Tython to learn what the ancient race of mystics had known about the Force. Once done, the Qua were destroyed. All but a minor portion of their populace wiped out. These few survivors forced back into a primitive way of life on their homeworld of Dathomir. The Rakata would rule much of the galaxy for thousands of years, and at some point during this distant past, the Tho-Yor activated. The ancient vessels sent out a call in the Force, drawing Force sensitives of their respective planets to them, shepherding them deep into the core of the galaxy. Eventually, dozens of species would be taken to the world of Tython, a planet strong in the Force. Here, the Tho-Yor scattered and settled into 8 sites, a 9th already present on the planet. The passengers disembarked, and the vessels began to teach what the Qua had known of the ways of the Force. This led directly to the formation of the Jedi Order, the spiritual successor to both the Jedi and the Sith. The Jedi held a more unified view of the Force. They believed that light and dark were two sides to the same whole, and that only through achieving balance between the two could one find true peace. The Jedi began to study the Force and realized that by maintaining balance they could bring harmony to Tython's ecosystem. When balance was lost, violent storms would erupt across the surface of the world, and as such, whenever any Jedi would fall too far to either the light or dark, they were sent to one of Tython's moons to meditate and bring themselves back into balance. Ahhhhh, the bright moon, was strong in the light side of the Force, and was where those who struggled with their inner dark were banished. Bogan, the dark moon, was strong in the dark side, and where those who became too tainted by the light went to meditate until they were back in balance. The people of Tython flourished under the Jedi, and eventually they began to have children who were not Force sensitive. Tython was not safe for these beings, and all those who could not feel the Force were banished from Tython's surface. Families were destroyed, and many Ahhhhh Jedi embraced the Bogan as a result. Eventually, those who were forced to leave Tython would spread out to the other 11 worlds in the system, and they would flourish. The Jedi would remain on Tython, and become almost something of a myth to the rest of the system. But peace was not to last. Eventually, a ruler known as Queen Ahhhhh came to power and threatened to unite the entire system under her despotic rule. The Jedi Order, seeing the threat the Queen posed to the system's stability, openly sided against her, pledging to stand against any move she made towards Tython. The Queen, in turn, declared open war. The conflict would eventually become known as the Despot War. Skirmishes erupted throughout the system, and the Jedi were initially caught off guard. But the Force is a powerful ally, and soon they began to stem the tide. The two sides of the Jedi's philosophy were made more extreme by the war. The Ahhhhh followers would often argue for restraint, while the followers of the Bogan were more dedicated to what had to be done to assure victory, including bombing civilian population centers. Eventually, Queen Ahhhhh was assassinated by the Jedi, something which had been forbidden until then. Her death fractured her army and ended the conflict, but not before millions had died across both sides. The wars the Jedi had been forced to wage had shaped them, pushed their beliefs further and further to extremes. Over time, factions arose which believed that either one aspect or the other of the Force was the sole basis of power. One group believed that Ahhhhh was the source of all good in the universe, and as such swore themselves to serve its will. The other saw the Bogan as a source of power, a means to shape their own destiny. This was the first real sign of the Jedi and the Sith. The followers of the Ahhhhh, appalled by the cost of the Despot War, swore off any use of the Bogan. The followers of the Bogan began to view those dedicated to the Ahhhhh as weak, unable to do what had to be done in order to bring true peace. They saw the hesitation of the Ahhhhh Jedi as something which had cost Tython dearly during the war and had prolonged the conflict. It was during this time that Master Dagon Locke, the master who slew Queen Ahhhhh, had a vision of a dark army overrunning the system and destroying the Jedi. The vision caused great debate among the council, and it was during this time of debate that an alien vessel crashed on Tython. A survivor, a man named Zesh, was pulled from the wreckage. Zesh was a Force hound, a Force-sensitive follower of the Rakatan Infinite Empire, sent out amongst the stars to hunt down worlds rich in the Force. Zesh's arrival caused deep divisions to appear amongst the Jedi. Or perhaps it would be more accurate to say his arrival caused existing cracks to truly fracture. Regardless, fear of the Rakatans began to drive the two camps of Jedi even further into their respective philosophies. The Ahhhhh Jedi argued for remaining hidden, while the Bogan argued for more active preparations for war, including the now insane Dagon Locke taking Zesh on a quest to forge new Force sabers for the Jedi. Force sabers were the weapons of the Rakatan Force hounds, and powerful indeed. Eventually, the Infinite Empire did invade, sparking a brutal war that raged across the system. For years, the Jedi held the line, and eventually the Rakatan Infinite Empire collapsed, essentially winning the war for the inhabitants of the Tython system. But victory did not bring peace. The many conflicts they had been forced to fight back-to-back had left their mark on the Jedi Order, and in the ensuing decade, the Ashlam Bogan would continue to drift further and further apart. Eventually, outright conflict erupted, the two sides battling across the surface of Tython, devastating much of the surface. The population suffered, and the Jedi reached the brink of collapse. It was in this chaos that Masters Rajavari, Garanjard, Calabrine, and Turs Sendon, some of the strongest and most senior Jedi, convened to discuss what was to be done. This council would decide that the Order needed to be reorganized, that they needed a new code, which constrained them to use their power only to protect the weak and disenfranchised. It was thought that a new, common identity would bring peace, harmony, and balance back to Tython. But this decision did not bring harmony, only the illusion of it. The Bogan Jedi became outcasts, and their disagreements among the newly formed Jedi High Council about how to proceed. And there were disagreements among the newly formed Jedi High Council about how to proceed. Some wished to take a more pacifistic approach, while others believed protecting the innocent required decisive action, or at the least, constant vigilance. Master Rajavari disagreed with the direction the Jedi began to take. He was chief among the voices arguing for a more active role, and soon he fell to the dark side. But Rajavari did not truly understand the power he wielded, and so he was defeated. His followers and many Bogan Jedi retreated to the city of Calith, and there fought a bloody last stand against the Jedi. Eventually, the Jedi were victorious, and Rajavari's followers slain or scattered. The Bogan Jedi were forced to flee the system, going into hiding throughout the Outer Rim. But the victory was hollow. Tython was destroyed, the balance now long abandoned. Force storms raged across the surface, and the Jedi could not rid the planet of all echoes of the dark side. They were forced to leave, and would eventually settle on Ossus, in the deep core. The Bogan Jedi would become hunted things, hiding in the dark places of the galaxy, and in the ashes of their philosophy, the Tree of Sith would eventually be reborn. What is to be learned from the actions of our forebears? What purpose does this tale serve to you, one who seeks knowledge of the Force? Know this: the Force has a will of its own. It moves us all and influences the galaxy, perhaps all life, as it sees fit. Does this mean it is conscious and has a plan? This would mean the Jedi, their eventual split, it was all destined to be. The Jedi and Sith were both meant to happen. It would also mean that each of us are slaves, trapped in a web that we can never truly understand. Even the Jedi, in their weakness and slavish obedience to the Force, believe it only actively intervenes from time to time. The truth is that the Force flows from all life, and this means life is as much an expression of the Force as the Force an expression of life. The Jedi would have always happened because conscious minds would have always eventually evolved to feel the Force, and in their curiosity they would have sought out knowledge of it, forming structures and organizations to aid the process. In this sense, perhaps the Jedi failed and gave birth to the Jedi and eventually the Sith, not because the Force was actively influencing events, but because the Force is a mirror. Life exists across a spectrum, light and dark, and all in between. Perhaps the Jedi and Sith were inevitable as reflections of the extremes of the spectrum. Perhaps the will of the Force is nothing more than the inevitable shift of things in the galaxy to reflect the true nature of all collected life. These are matters which have been debated since the earliest days of the Jedi Order. In the end, it does not matter. The result is the same. But I have broken free. I have had the force of will, the inner strength necessary to embrace the dark side. I am not a pawn of the Force, not a slave to its will. I have learned how and when to ride its currents, and when to bend them to my own designs. And as such, it has become my tool, freed me to steer my own destiny. This is the promise of the dark side, the same promise which first drew you to my holocron, the promise of true freedom. You must have the strength needed to find places of which I speak. Only by following in my footsteps can you truly begin to know the Force. There is power yet in the Tython system. I have walked the surface of Ahhhhh, and I have drank the sweet nectar of Bogan's dark side energies. I have sat in low orbit over Tython's skies and felt the chaotic swirl of the Force below. There is much yet to be learned meditating there, many secrets to pull from the swirling energies which gather in that place. You can see the storms, their lightning flickering like lanterns from space. The destruction ravages the surface of the planet, stands as a testament to the failure of both the Ahhhhh and the Bogan Jedi to understand the power at their command. It also stands as a reminder that from failure one must evolve or die. Both the Ahhhhh and Bogan Jedi would learn this lesson, and learn it well. But that is for the next chapter. For now, meditate on what you have learned. Only when you have come to understand the lessons of the Jedi will I resume normal function. Until then, may the Force break your chains.